Can you be a good person without God? Imagine this. There is a person who does not believe in God. He does not pray. He does not go to church. He does not believe that heaven is waiting for him, nor does he fear that hell is threatening him. But he takes care of his family. If he finds money that does not belong to him, he returns it. He helps strangers even when no one is watching. Even when he knows he could easily get away with cheating, he chooses not to. And he spends his life trying not to cause unnecessary harm to others. Now, an uncomfortable question arises. If this person does not believe in God, is he still a good person? According to a major study by the Pew Research Center, 68% of American adults answer yes. They believe that a person can be moral and have good values and principles without believing in God. On the other hand, 30% of Americans say that belief in God is necessary in order to be moral and have good values. At first glance, this almost feels like we have our answer. 68% have spoken. Case closed. But is morality decided by a vote? If 99% of people say something is right, does that automatically make it right? No. And if only one person says something is wrong, does that automatically make that person wrong? No. So, this survey tells us what Americans believe. It does not prove who is right. And this is where the question starts becoming much deeper and more difficult than it first appears. In reality, there are two different questions hidden inside the same sentence. The first question is simple. Can a person who does not believe in God still do good things? When we look at the real world around us, that is very difficult to deny. People who do not believe in religion still love their children. They donate money. They care for the sick. They risk their own lives to save strangers. They keep their promises. They make sacrifices for other people. Even many Christian thinkers do not claim that an atheist is incapable of being kind, honest, or helpful. But the real disagreement does not begin there. The real disagreement begins with another, much deeper question. If there is no God, what actually makes those actions good? Suppose someone says that morality comes from society. We learn not to murder, steal, or abuse others because our society and culture teach us that those things are wrong. That sounds reasonable. But history makes that answer uncomfortable. At different times, societies legalized slavery. Governments accepted persecution as law. Nazi Germany had laws too. It had a government. It had rules. So, the question becomes, if morality is simply whatever a society accepts, how can one society stand before another and say, your laws are not just different from ours, your laws are actually evil? This is where the religious argument begins to sound powerful. A believer can argue that morality needs a standard above government, a standard above culture, a permanent foundation above personal desire, self-interest, and majority opinion. Because if human beings create the rules, those same human beings can rewrite those rules the moment they become inconvenient. But if God is perfectly good, then according to the religious side, God can provide a moral standard that does not change when presidents change, when cultures change, or when public opinion changes. That argument sounds strong, but the same answer immediately creates another difficult question. If something is good only because God commands it, then if God commanded anything at all, would that thing automatically become good? But if God commands something because it is already good, then does goodness exist independently of God's command? Philosophers have struggled with questions like these for more than 2,000 years. Modern theist thinkers often respond this way. Goodness is not something separate from God, and God does not arbitrarily invent good and evil. Instead, goodness itself is grounded in God's perfect, just, and good nature. But secular philosophers have their own answers as well. Some philosophers argue that morality can be grounded in objective facts about the real conditions of conscious beings. Pain is real. Psychological trauma is real. Human flourishing is real. Trust, freedom, coercion, suffering, and well-being are not simply products of our imagination. From this point of view, torturing a child for entertainment is not wrong only because a government has banned it. It is not wrong only because a religion has condemned it. It is wrong because of the very real and horrifying suffering and damage that the act causes to a conscious human being. But the religious critic can take one more step. Science can show us that torture causes suffering. Biology can explain what is happening inside the body. Psychology can explain what the victim is experiencing. But the question still remains, why are we morally obligated to care about someone else's suffering? If a powerful person can benefit by hurting others, and he knows for certain that he will never be punished, why should he care about their suffering? That is not an easy question. But what is interesting is that the same question can also be turned in the other direction. Saying, God commanded it, still leaves another question. Why should a person obey God's command? The religious side has an answer. They can argue that a perfectly good creator has legitimate moral authority over the beings he created. But something important becomes clear here. Neither side can easily escape philosophy. In the end, both sides have to explain why their foundation deserves moral authority. Now, let's look at how Americans actually make moral decisions in real life. In a Pew Research Center study, 93% of Americans said practical experience and common sense were extremely or very important when making moral decisions. 92% said logic and reason were important. 75% said scientific information was important. And 53% said religious teachings and beliefs were important. Something interesting appears here. Even highly religious people do not rely only on religious rules when making moral decisions. Real human morality seems to be a mixture of many forces working together: belief, conscience, culture, empathy, reason, experience, family, fear, love, and sometimes self-interest. Now, look at the research on behavior. That makes things even more uncomfortable for both sides if they are looking for an easy victory. A major meta-analysis covering roughly 60 years of research and more than 800,000 participants found an overall positive relationship between religiosity and pro-social behavior. In other words, people who were more religious showed some positive association with behaviors that help others. But when researchers looked beyond how people describe themselves in self-reports and examined directly measured behavior, that relationship became much smaller. So, science does not give us the right to declare that religious people are automatically better people. But science also does not allow us to say that religion has absolutely nothing to do with morality. And perhaps the most fascinating part of this entire debate is the judgment we sometimes form before we even look at the evidence. Research conducted across different countries has revealed an unusual psychological tendency. People often instinctively associate extreme immoral behavior with atheists. In other words, sometimes suspicion begins before the person has done anything wrong at all. Now, let's return to the original question. Can you be a good person without God? If by good, we mean the ability to show kindness, honesty, sacrifice, empathy, loyalty, and concern for other human beings, then there is strong reason to believe that people who do not believe in God can possess those qualities too. But what if our question is not only about behavior? What if the question is, what ultimately makes good and evil objectively real? That is where the answer becomes much more difficult. A believer may point to God. A secular moral realist may point to objective moral truths. A humanist may point to human dignity and well-being. A Kantian thinker may point to reason and universal duty. But every one of these answers comes with difficult questions of its own. Maybe that is why this debate has remained alive from one generation to the next. Maybe the real mystery is not whether an atheist can do something good. The real mystery is this: when doing the wrong thing is easier, when it benefits us more, and when nobody is watching, why do any of us still feel a moral obligation to do what is right? And perhaps, before asking, can a person be good without God, we should first try to answer an even deeper, even more uncomfortable, and even more dangerous question. What ultimately do we mean by good?